Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The morning air smelled of salt and destruction. Serena Brooks stood in front of what remained of Brooks Flow Cafe, her dream reduced to splintered wood and shattered glass. Hurricane Clara had swept through Miami with vengeful fury 3 days ago, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. "It's all gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of chainsaws and emergency vehicles still clearing the streets. 6 months of savings, 2 years of planning, and just 8 weeks of actually being open all washed away in a single night. The small coffee counter, where she'd served her grandmother's secret recipe Cuban coffee, lay crushed under a fallen beam. The hand-painted mural of the Miami coastline, that local artist Javier had spent weeks perfecting, was now just fragments of color among the debris. Serena stepped carefully through what had once been her front door, wincing as broken glass crunched beneath her boots. The waterline on the remaining walls showed how high the storm surge had reached, nearly 5 feet. Everything below that mark was ruined. The antique espresso machine she'd restored herself, the custom-built pastry case, even the old family photos she'd hung to make the space feel like home. She bent down to retrieve a waterlogged menu card, the ink bleeding across the paper. Her grandmother's recipes: cafecito, pastelito de guayaba, tres leches, cake listed in both English and Spanish. Serena had wanted everyone to feel welcome here. Serena's phone buzzed in her pocket. Her insurance agent again. She let it ring through to voicemail. No point answering when she already knew what he would say. Act of God, limited coverage, deductible too high. The technical terms that essentially meant she was on her own. The phone buzzed again immediately after. This time her landlord, another call she couldn't bear to answer. The cafe space rent was due in a week, and her apartment rent was already 2 weeks late. Serena. She turned to find her best friend Lila picking her way through the rubble, careful not to snag her nurse's scrubs. Lila had come straight from her night shift at Miami General, dark circles under her eyes indicating she hadn't slept yet. "You shouldn't be here," Serena said, wiping quickly at her eyes. "You need rest, and you need a friend." Lila wrapped an arm around Serena's shoulders. "Any word from the insurance company?" Serena laughed bitterly. "They'll cover about 20% of the damage, barely enough to haul away the debris, let alone rebuild. What about a loan? Your credit's good. 3 banks, 3 rejections." Serena kicked at a piece of broken tile. "Apparently, being wiped out by a hurricane makes me a high-risk investor." Lila's eyes narrowed. "Like what? Selling your organs?" "At this point, I'm considering it." Serena wasn't entirely joking. The cafe had been more than a business. It was her heritage, her grandmother's recipes finally having a home outside their family kitchen. Now, with the foreclosure notice on her apartment already in the mail, she had nowhere to live and no business to rebuild. "Did you try calling that small business association, the one that helps with disaster relief?" Lila asked. 7-month waiting list for funds," Serena replied. "And even then, it's just low-interest loans, not grants." She sighed. "I don't want to just survive, Elle. This cafe was supposed to be my future. There might be another way," Lila said hesitantly after a long pause. "But you're not going to like it." Serena raised an eyebrow. "I'm living on your couch and about to lose everything I've worked for. Try me." Lila pulled her away from the rubble toward her car. "Not here. Let's get coffee first." The irony of which is not lost on me. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth of a generic chain coffee shop, Serena grimacing as she sipped what passed for a cortado here. "This is an insult to coffee everywhere," she muttered, adding more sugar in a futile attempt to improve the taste. "So," Serena prompted, "this mysterious solution you mentioned?" Lila fidgeted with her cup. "I overheard something at the hospital. There's this patient, well, not really a patient. He owns half the hospital wing. Get to the point, Elle. Damian Knight is looking for a surrogate, but not the traditional way." Lila leaned in, lowering her voice. "He wants to conceive naturally, one time only, with someone healthy, intelligent, and attractive. In exchange, he's offering enough money to." She gestured vaguely in the direction of the destroyed cafe. Serena stared at her friend, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she set her cup down carefully. "You're suggesting I sell my body and my child to some rich guy I've never met?" "I'm suggesting you hear the details before dismissing it," Lila countered it. "This isn't some creepy old man. He's in his 30s, self-made billionaire, and from what I gather, He's offering a comprehensive contract that protects both parties. Why would a billionaire need to pay for this? Can't he just date someone? Apparently, he doesn't want the emotional complications. Business is his life, and he wants an heir without the messiness of a relationship. Leela shrugged. He's willing to pay 6 figures, plus medical expenses, and a stipend during pregnancy. Serena shook her head in disbelief. This is insane. I'm not that desperate. But even as she said it, her mind calculated the mortgage payments piling up, the suppliers she still owed, the loans that would follow her for decades. The cafe had been her last connection to her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents died, who had taught her that food was love made tangible. And what happens to the baby afterward? I'm just supposed to hand over my child and cash the check. The thought made her stomach turn. From what I understand, you'd have some visitation rights, but he'd have primary custody. It's all spelled out in the contract. Lila reached across the table to squeeze Serena's hand. Look, I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just laying out an option because I can't stand seeing you lose everything you've worked for. Serena pulled her hand away, suddenly feeling trapped. The coffee shop's walls seemed to close in around her, the chatter of other customers growing distant as her thoughts raced. Was she really considering this? What would her grandmother say? Just think about it, Lila said, sliding a business card across the table. His assistant's contact information. The worst that happens is you meet him and say no. Serena picked up the card-heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. Valeria Cruz, Executive Assistant to Damian Knight. Knight Enterprises. I'll think about it, she said finally, tucking the card into her pocket. But only because I've officially hit rock bottom. What she didn't say was that rock bottom felt a lot like standing in quicksand, and she was sinking fast enough to grab at any rope, no matter how repulsive the hand holding it might be. That night, alone on Lila's couch, with the foreclosure notice in one hand and the business card in the other, Serena made the call. She had exactly 3 weeks before the bank took everything, and her grandmother had always told her that pride made a poor bedmate when survival was at stake. The assistant answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Mr. Knight can see you tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. The car will pick you up at 1:30. No questions asked, no details required, as if Serena was simply another business transaction waiting to be processed. I thank you, Serena managed to say, her throat suddenly dry. Should I bring anything? A resume or... She trailed off, realizing how absurd the question was. What qualifications did one need to sell their womb, Mr. Knight has already reviewed your background. Just be punctual. The line went dead before Serena could ask how Damian Knight knew anything about her. As she set the phone down, Serena caught sight of her reflection in Lila's darkened television screen. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, desperate, cornered, considering something she would have found unthinkable just days ago. Just a meeting. She told her reflection, you're just going to hear him out. But as she lay awake that night, watching headlights trace patterns across Lila's living room ceiling, Serena wondered how much of her soul she was willing to trade to keep her dreams alive. Tomorrow, she would find out exactly what the going rate was. Chapter 2. The Proposition. The black car arrived precisely at 1:30 p.m. Serena watched it from Lila's apartment window, a sleek Mercedes with tinted windows that seemed to absorb the Miami sunlight rather than reflect it. The driver, dressed in a crisp suit despite the heat, exited and scanned the building numbers before checking his watch. Well, that's punctual, Lila said from behind her. You sure you don't want me to come with you? Serena shook her head, smoothing down the front of her navy blue dress, the only professional outfit she'd managed to salvage from her flooded apartment. I need to do this alone. Just remember, you can walk away at any point. Lila squeezed her shoulder, no matter how intimidating he is. Serena had spent half the night researching Damian Knight. Business magazines called him brilliant, ruthless, innovative. Social media branded him cold, calculating, devastatingly handsome. Every article mentioned his intensely private nature and laser focus on expanding Knight Enterprises from tech into healthcare, real estate, and green energy. None explained why a man who could have anything would need to hire a woman to bear his child. Downtown Miami, skyscrapers gleamed in the afternoon sun, survivors of the hurricane that had devastated the smaller structures. The car pulled up to one of the tallest, a modern glass tower with Knight Enterprises emblazoned across the top in understated lettering. Miss Brooks, the driver said, opening her door, please proceed to the private elevator. Miss, Cruz will meet you there. The lobby felt more like an art gallery than an office building, with soaring ceilings and sculptures that probably cost more than what remained of Serena's cafe. A woman waited by a sleek elevator set apart from the main bank hall, impeccably dressed, with a tablet in hand. Miss Brooks, Valeria Cruz. Her handshake was firm, professional. Follow me, please. The elevator required a key card and fingerprint scan. Mr. Knight values his privacy, Valeria explained as they ascended. The top 3 floors are his exclusive domain. Serena nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. How many women has he interviewed for this position? Valeria's expression remained neutral. You're the first. The elevator doors opened directly into a vast office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Miami's glittering bay, the beach, and, in the distance, the neighborhood still recovering from the hurricane. Serena could almost see the flattened remains of her cafe from this height. Mr. Knight will join you momentarily. Would you like water? Coffee? No, thank you, Serena managed, though her throat felt like sandpaper. Valeria disappeared through a side door. Leaving Serena alone with the intimidating view, she approached the windows, drawn to the sight of her city, spread out beneath her. Miami always rebuilds, a deep voice said from behind her, though some recover faster than others. Serena turned to find herself face to face with Damian Knight. The photos hadn't done him justice. Tall, with broad shoulders and an athletic build, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to power. His dark hair was cut short, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. But it was his eyes that caught Serena off guard, a penetrating gray that seemed to calculate everything they observed. Mr. Knight, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for seeing me. His handshake was firm, brief. Damian, please, if we're discussing what I think we're discussing, formality seems unnecessary. He gestured toward a seating area, modern leather chairs arranged around a low glass table. You've lost something in the hurricane, he said, taking a seat across from her. Not a question, but a statement. My cafe. Brooks Flow. Serena swallowed hard. 8 weeks open before Clara hit. Brooks Flow, he repeated. Cuban-inspired cuisine with a modern twist. Located in Little Havana. Your grandmother's recipes formed the foundation of your menu. Serena blinked in surprise. You've done your research. I never enter negotiations uninformed. He leaned forward slightly. I know about the 3 bank rejections, the insurance settlement that covers barely 1/5 of your losses, the foreclosure notice on your apartment, your excellent credit score until 3 weeks ago, your culinary degree from Johnson & Wales, your grandmother who raised you after your parents died in that car accident when you were 11. A chill ran through Serena despite the comfortable temperature. That's thorough. I'm trusting you with something precious to me. Due diligence is required. His expression softened marginally. I'm sorry about your cafe. The review in the Miami Herald suggested it had exceptional potential. He stood and walked to a sideboard, where he poured 2 glasses of water. Which brings us to why you're here. He handed her a glass, and Serena took it gratefully, using the moment to gather her composure. My friend mentioned you're looking for a surrogate. Not exactly. Damian returned to his seat. A surrogate carries another couple's embryo. What I'm proposing is a natural conception, resulting in a child that would be biologically both of ours, though legally primarily mine. The clinical way he described it made Serena's skin crawl, yet his directness was almost refreshing after days of sympathetic platitudes from bank managers. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Why this arrangement instead of the usual ways people have children? Something flickered in his eyes amusement. Perhaps. The usual ways involve lengthy emotional entanglements that I have neither the time nor inclination for. My company demands my complete focus. I don't date, Miss Brooks. I don't do relationships. But you want a child. I want an heir, he corrected. Someone to build this legacy for. Someone to continue what I've started when I'm gone. That sounds very medieval, Serena said before she could think better of it. To her surprise, he smiled a brief, genuine expression that transformed his face. Perhaps, but pragmatic. I'm 38. Building something that will outlast me has become a priority. He reached for a leather portfolio on the table, opening it to reveal a document several inches thick. This is the agreement I'm proposing. My attorneys have drafted it to protect both our interests. Serena stared at the contract, its legal terminology swimming before her eyes. Could you just explain it in simple terms first? Damian nodded. The terms are straightforward. We would have one night together with the explicit purpose of conception. Following confirmation of pregnancy, I would provide financial support throughout the pregnancy medical care, living expenses, nutritional needs. Upon delivery of a healthy child, you would receive the agreed-upon sum. The child would legally be mine, with you having limited visitation rights if you desire them, and the amount is $2 million, plus all expenses during pregnancy. Serena nearly choked on her water. The figure was far more than she needed to rebuild the cafe and clear her debts. That's significant. I don't undervalue important services, Damien said simply. And bringing my child into the world is perhaps the most important service anyone could provide me. Serena set her glass down carefully. What if I don't get pregnant? We try once more. If that fails, you receive a consolation payment of $100,000 for your time and effort. His gaze was steady, unemotional. There are medical screenings first, of course. My doctor would examine you tomorrow if you agree to move forward, and if I have pregnancy complications, or if Serena forced herself to say it, if I miscarry, full medical care, regardless of outcome, half payment in case of late-term loss. He spoke as if discussing a business merger rather than the potential loss of a child. Serena stood abruptly, needing space from his calculating presence. She walked back to the windows, looking out at the city where her dreams lay in ruins. $2 million would not only rebuild her cafe, but could fund several locations. She could create the restaurant empire her grandmother had always believed she was capable of building. All it would cost was 9 months of her life, and giving up a child. I would need my own lawyer to review this, she said without turning around. Of course, I've taken the liberty of providing a list of reputable attorneys who specialize in reproductive law. You may choose any of them, and I'll cover their fees, regardless of your final decision. Serena turned back to face him. Why me? With your resources, you could have approached anyone. For the first time, Damien seemed slightly uncomfortable. He stood, joining her by the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Genetics matter to me. Your medical history is excellent. No hereditary conditions of concern. Your intelligence is evident in your academic performance and business planning. Your appearance is, his eyes briefly scanned her face, aesthetically pleasing. Your demonstrated resilience and determination in building your business suggests character traits I would value in a child. You make me sound like a prize-breeding mare, Serena said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. I make you sound like what you are, a potential genetic contributor to the most important project of my life. His voice remained even. I'm not looking for a wife, Miss Brooks. I'm not looking for love. I'm looking for the right genetic match and a clear arrangement without messy emotions. And you think having a child isn't messy? That feelings won't complicate things? With proper legal boundaries, complications can be minimized. He returned to the table, closing the portfolio. Take the contract. Have your attorney review it. You have 3 days to decide. Serena felt dismissed, yet also strangely empowered. This cold, calculating man needed something from her that all his billions couldn't simply purchase outright. What if I want changes to the terms? Damien raised an eyebrow. Such as? I don't know yet, but I want the option to negotiate, not just accept or reject. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Reasonable. My assistant will provide her direct line. When your attorney has reviewed the contract, we can discuss any proposed amendments. Valeria appeared as if summoned, carrying a slim leather case. The contract, the attorney list, and my contact information, she explained, handing it to Serena. The car is waiting whenever you're ready. Damien extended his hand once more. I look forward to hearing your decision, Miss Brooks. His hand was warm, his grip confident. Serena wondered what it would be like to be touched by those hands in a more intimate context. The thought sent an unexpected shiver through her that she immediately tried to suppress. You'll have my answer within 3 days, she said, relieved that her voice remained steady. As the elevator descended, Serena opened the case. Scanning the first page of the contract, the language was cold. Clinical genetic contribution, biological merger, parental rights transfer. Nothing about the miracle of creating life. The bond between mother and child. Could she really do this trade a piece of herself, her child, for financial security? Back at Lila's apartment, her friend was waiting anxiously. How did it go? What's he like? Are you going to do it? Serena set the contract case on the coffee table. He's exactly what you'd expect. Cold, calculating, completely detached. He talked about having a child like he was ordering a custom-built car, but the money, $2 million, Lila's eyes widened. Holy yeah. Serena sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. He wants an answer in 3 days. What are you thinking? Serena stared at the leather case. Inside was the potential salvation of her dreams, the resurrection of her cafe, financial security she'd never imagined possible, all in exchange for a child she hadn't planned on having anyway, at least not anytime soon. I'm thinking I need to find a lawyer, and then I need to decide how much of my soul I'm willing to sell to this devil in a bespoke suit. What she didn't say, couldn't admit even to Lila, was that beneath her disgust at the clinical nature of his proposal, she'd felt something else during that meetinga, flicker of attraction, unwanted and inconvenient. To the man who saw her as nothing more than a biological vessel for his future heir. And that, perhaps, scared her more than the contract itself. Chapter 3. The Arrangement. 3 days of legal consultations, sleepless nights, and endless debates with Lila had led to this moment. Serena stood outside Damian Knight's penthouse door, contract in hand, heart pounding. After multiple revisions and negotiations, some of which had surprised her by being accepted without argument, she had signed the agreement that morning. She was officially selling her womb to a billionaire. The attorney she'd chosen, Sofia Mendez, had been thorough and surprisingly supportive. "This isn't the worst contract I've seen," she'd said after reviewing the initial draft. "But we're going to make it better," and they had, adding provisions for Serena's post-birth recovery, clearer visitation rights, and a clause preventing Damian from seeking additional children from her in the future without a completely new agreement. Now, as Valeria Cruz led her into a different part of the penthouse than she'd seen before, Serena couldn't help wondering if any legal language could truly prepare her for what was about to happen. "Mr. Knight will join you shortly," Valeria said, gesturing to a sitting room furnished with understated luxury. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Wine?" "Water is fine," Serena replied, her throat suddenly dry. As Valeria left, she took in her surroundings. Unlike the stark modernity of his office, this space felt almost warm, rich woods, soft lighting, and a wall of windows showcasing the Miami skyline, now twinkling with evening lights. "You came." Serena turned to find Damian watching her from the doorway. Gone was the impeccable business suit, replaced by dark jeans and a simple gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casual attire should have made him look more approachable. Somehow, it only emphasized his inherent power. "I signed the contract," she said, gesturing to the folder on the coffee table. "Your assistant already confirmed the first payment was deposited." The good faith deposit of $50,000 had appeared in her account that morning, enough to secure temporary housing and begin clearing her most pressing debts. Damian nodded, crossing to a sideboard where he poured himself a drink. "Your attorney was quite persistent with those revisions. I believe in negotiating from a position of strength." His lips curved slightly, a quality I hope our child inherits. Our child, the words hung in the air between them, making the purpose of the evening impossible to ignore. Serena's stomach tightened with anxiety. "The medical screening confirmed you're ovulating," Damian continued, his tone clinically detached once more. "The timing is optimal." Serena fought the urge to flee. This was happening. This was really happening. "I know. Your doctor was very thorough." An awkward silence fell. For all his meticulous planning, Damian seemed suddenly uncertain how to proceed. He took a sip of his drink, then set it down untouched. "There's a guest room prepared if you'd prefer to prepare yourself," he said finally. "Or we could have dinner first." The thought of sitting through a meal with the tension hanging between them was unbearable. "I think I'd rather just get this over with," Serena said, then winced at her phrasing. "That came out wrong." "No, it didn't. This is a transaction, not a seduction." Damian's voice was flat, but something flickered in his eyes. "Follow me." He led her down a hallway to what was clearly the master suite, spacious room dominated by a large bed with simple, elegant bedding. The lights were dimmed, and floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the ocean in the distance. "The bathroom is through there if you want privacy," Damian said, gesturing to a door. "Take whatever time you need." Serena nodded, grateful for the momentary escape. The bathroom was larger than her entire former apartment. With a marble shower that could have held 6 people, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just sex. Clinical, contractual sex." She splashed water on her face, took a deep breath, and returned to the bedroom. Damien had removed his shirt, revealing a physique that spoke of regular workouts despite his demanding schedule. He stood by the windows, his back to her, tension evident in his shoulders. "I've never done anything like this before," he admitted without turning. "Despite what you might think, I don't make a habit of arrangements like this." Something in his confession made him seem suddenly human, vulnerable even. Serena approached slowly. "Neither have I." When he turned to face her, the clinical detachment she'd seen in his office was gone. In its place was something raw, almost hungry. "The contract specifies one night," he said, his voice lower than before. "Perhaps we should make it count." Serena had expected mechanical, efficient coupling, the minimum required to achieve their goal. She was wholly unprepared for the way Damien crossed the space between them and seized her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers for permission. "May I?" he asked simply. She nodded, unable to form words as his thumb traced her lower lip. The kiss surprised her not, the hard, dominating pressure she'd expected from a man used to command, but something exploratory, almost questioning. Serena found herself responding, her hands moving to his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her fingertips. What followed was nothing like the clinical procedure outlined in their contract. Damien touched her with reverent attention, learning her body's responses with the same focus he likely gave to complex business negotiations. Clothes were removed slowly, each new expanse of skin explored with hands and lips. When he finally laid her on the bed, Serena was stunned by her own desire. This was supposed to be a transaction, a means to an end. Yet as Damien moved above her, his eyes never leaving hers, something shifted between them. "You're beautiful," he whispered, the words seemingly torn from him against his will. Serena felt a power. She hadn't expected the power to crack the composure of this controlled man, to draw unexpected tenderness from someone who prided himself on emotional detachment. She pulled him closer, her body arching into his, no longer simply accommodating but actively seeking. Their coupling was neither the mechanical act she dreaded nor the cold transaction he'd proposed. Instead, it was heat and connection. Bodies finding a rhythm that belied their status as strangers. Damien whispered her name as they moved together, the sound of it on his lips unexpectedly intimate. When release came, it swept through them both with an intensity that left Serena gasping. Damien held her tightly, his face buried in her neck, his breathing ragged against her skin. For several long moments, they remained entwined. The line between business arrangement and genuine connection blurred beyond recognition. Reality returned slowly. Damien rolled away first, his expression unreadable in the dim light. The careful distance he'd maintained in all their previous interactions seemed impossible now that they'd shared such intimacy. Yet Serena could almost see him rebuilding his walls, brick by brick. "I hope that was satisfactory," he said finally, the formality of his words at odds with the lingering heat between them. Serena almost laughed at the absurdity. "Yes, very effective." "Good." He stood, reaching for his discarded clothes. "You're welcome to stay the night. The guest room is prepared, or you can remain here." The hesitation in his offer told her which he preferred. Despite their unexpected chemistry, Damien clearly needed to re-establish boundaries. "I think the guest room would be best," she said, gathering her own clothes. "We agreed this was just one night." He nodded, relief and something like disappointment flashing across his face. "Of course, Valeria will show you out in the morning. My schedule requires an early start." Just like that, they were back to business. Except Serena couldn't forget the way he'd looked at her, touched her, whispered her name. Couldn't forget the moment his careful control had shattered, revealing something almost vulnerable beneath. In the guest room, surrounded by luxurious furnishings that would have impressed her just days ago, Serena stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The contract had accounted for every practical aspect of their arrangement: financial support, medical care, legal rights. What it hadn't accounted for was chemistry, connection, the possibility that what should have been clinical might instead be complicated by something dangerously close to desire. It was just sex, she told herself firmly. Good sex, but still just a means to an end. Yet, as sleep finally claimed her, Serena couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The neat, contractual arrangement they'd agreed to had just become infinitely more complex, and neither of them had thought to include a clause covering unexpected attraction. In the morning, Damien was gone, as promised, leaving Valeria to escort her to the waiting car. The assistant's expression revealed nothing, though Serena wondered how much she knew or guessed about what had transpired. "Mr. Knight asked me to provide you with this," Valeria said, handing Serena a small bag containing a morning-after pill. The contract specifies trying to conceive, but he wanted to ensure you had options. Serena stared at the pill, surprised by this unexpected consideration. After a moment's hesitation, she handed it back. The contract specifies trying to conceive, she repeated. I intend to honor my end of the bargain. Valeria's professional mask slipped briefly, revealing something like respect. Very well. The car will take you wherever you'd like to go. As the elevator descended, Serena placed a hand on her stomach, wondering if a new life had already begun, taking form within her. If so, would it have Damien's penetrating gray eyes, his determined chin, her own stubborn streak? The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange calm. Whatever happened next, pregnancy or not, complications or smooth sailing, she'd faced the most difficult part. Spending a night with a man who saw her as a means to an end. What she hadn't expected was that she might see glimpses of something more in him, something human beneath the billion-dollar armor, something that made her wonder if the clinical arrangement they'd signed might prove far messier than either had anticipated. Chapter 4. Unexpected Complications. Serena stared at the pregnancy test on her bathroom counter, the two pink lines unmistakable even from across the room. 3 weeks after her night with Damien, she had confirmation. She was pregnant with a billionaire's baby. She'd taken the test at the earliest possible moment, though Damien's contract stipulated she should immediately contact his private physician for official confirmation. The doctor had scheduled her for later that morning, but Serena needed this moment alone with the knowledge before it became another clause in their agreement. Her hand drifted to her still flat stomach. Was it real? A tiny cluster of cells now growing inside her, half hers, half his, half warm cafe owner, half cold corporate titan. What have I gotten you into, little one? She whispered. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Lila, calling for the third time that morning. Did you take it? Her friend asked without preamble. It's positive. A long pause. How do you feel? I don't know. Serena sat on the edge of her bathtub. The funds from Damien had allowed her to rent a modest but comfortable apartment while she began the process of rebuilding her cafe. Scared. Overwhelmed. Weirdly okay. The contract is clear. I know exactly what happens next. Have you told him yet? No? I'll tell him after the doctor confirms it. 2 hours later, sitting in the plush office of Dr. Abigail Lee, Serena received that confirmation, along with a folder of prenatal vitamins, dietary guidelines, and a schedule of appointments that seemed excessive for someone only 3 weeks pregnant. Mr. Knight has arranged for you to have the most comprehensive prenatal care available, Dr. Lee explained, her manner professional but kind. I'll be overseeing everything personally. Is that standard practice? Serena asked, flipping through the detailed care plan. For my VIP patients, yes. The doctor's careful phrasing made it clear she understood the unusual nature of the arrangement. Would you like me to inform Mr. Knight of the confirmation, or would you prefer to do so yourself? Serena hesitated. According to their contract, notification should go through official channels, doctors, lawyers, assistants, the sterile path, but something about their night together made that feel wrong. I'll tell him, she decided. Can you send him the medical report afterward? Dr. Lee nodded. Of course. Outside the medical building, Serena paused on the sidewalk, phone in hand. She had Damien's direct number, given to her for pregnancy-related emergencies only, but had never used it. Taking a deep breath, she dialed. He answered on the second ring. Serena. His voice betrayed no surprise, despite the fact she'd never called him before. Is everything all right? Yes, She hesitated, suddenly aware of how intimate this news felt despite the clinical nature of their arrangement. I just left Dr. Lee's office. The test is positive. I'm pregnant. Silence stretched across the line, long enough that Serena wondered if they'd been disconnected. Then, a single exhaled breath. You're certain? Blood test confirmed it. About 3 weeks along. Another pause. How are you feeling? The question surprised her. Their contract detailed medical care and financial support, but personal concern hadn't been part of the arrangement. Physically, I'm fine. A little tired. No morning sickness yet. Good. That's good. His voice sounded different, less controlled. Perhaps I'll have Valeria release the next payment immediately. The funds for your cafe reconstruction, as promised in the contract. Confirmation of pregnancy triggered the release of the first major payment, $500,000, to begin rebuilding Brooksflow Cafe while she carried his child. Thank you, Serena said. She waited for him to end the call, to retreat back to the safety of their business arrangement, but instead heard what sounded like him pacing. "I'd like to meet," he said abruptly, "to discuss next steps. The contract is pretty clear about next steps. Nevertheless, I prefer to confirm arrangements in person. Dinner tonight, if you're available." Serena frowned at her phone. Their agreement didn't specify ongoing dinners or meetings beyond necessary medical appointments, which he wasn't even required to attend. "I've already started meeting with contractors about the cafe rebuild," she said, unsure why she felt the need to explain herself. "My schedule is pretty full. Badian, I'll send a car." It wasn't quite a command, but close enough to irritate her. "Fine. Text me the restaurant details. I can drive myself. A pause. It would be at my residence. More private." The memory of his penthouse and his bedroom flashed vividly in her mind. "I'd prefer a public place." She could almost hear his frown. "Very well. Merida at 8. I'll make reservations." Merida was among the most exclusive restaurants in Miami. Even at the height of her pre-hurricane success, Serena wouldn't have been able to get a table there without weeks of advance notice. "I'll be there," she agreed, ending the call before he could issue any more quasi-commands. Within minutes, her phone pinged with notifications. The substantial deposit to her account, a confirmation of her dinner reservation, and a detailed prenatal vitamin subscription that would deliver to her door weekly. Damian Knight might be unexpectedly interested in meeting, but he was still approaching her pregnancy like a well-managed business venture. The rest of the day passed in a blur of contractor meetings at her cafe site. The funds from Damian meant she could not only rebuild, but improve better kitchen equipment. A small expansion into the vacant space next door, upgraded furnishings. As she reviewed plans with the construction manager, Serena found herself temporarily forgetting the strange circumstances that had made this restoration possible, until her phone pinged with another notification. A grocery delivery service had been set up in her name, with a curated selection of pregnancy-approved foods scheduled for weekly delivery. "I don't remember agreeing to this," she muttered, scrolling through the elaborate meal plans someone had created for her. By the time she arrived at Merida that evening, Serena's initial gratitude had curdled into irritation. Damian was already seated at a secluded corner table when the maitre d' led her through the dimly lit restaurant. He stood as she approached, his eyes taking in the simple black dress she'd chosen. "You look well," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for the cafe funds," Serena replied, getting straight to business as she sat. "The contractor started drawing up plans today." Damian nodded, signaling a waiter who immediately appeared with sparkling water for her and what looked like scotch for him. "I've taken the liberty of arranging some additional services to ensure your health and comfort during the pregnancy." "Yes, I noticed grocery delivery, vitamin subscriptions. A prenatal yoga class membership I didn't ask for." She met his eyes directly. "The contract specified medical care and a monthly stipend. It didn't mention you micromanaging my life." Something flashed in his gray eye, surprise, perhaps, at being challenged. "I'm ensuring optimal conditions for my child's development." "Our child," Serena corrected. "At least biologically, and while I appreciate the thought, I'm perfectly capable of managing my own nutrition and activities." Damian leaned back slightly, studying her. "Most women would appreciate such conveniences. I'm not most women, and I didn't agree to surrender my autonomy along with my eggs." She took a sip of water. "If you want to help, ask what I need instead of assuming." For a moment, he looked ready to argue, but then his expression shifted into something almost like respect. "Very well. What do you need, Serena?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "I need to maintain some control over my life. This situation is already strange enough without feeling like I'm being monitored and managed." Damian nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Though you should know the prenatal dietary guidelines came from Dr. Lee, not me. I have her recommendations in writing. I don't need them delivered to my doorstep in the form of pre-selected groceries." A waiter approached with menus, but Damian waved him away. "We'll need a few more minutes." When they were alone again, he leaned forward. "There's something else we should discuss." Serena tensed. "What?" "Security." His expression turned serious. "Once news of your pregnancy becomes public knowledge, you may face unwanted attention. I've arranged for discreet security personnel to—" "Absolutely not," Serena interrupted. "I'm not having bodyguards following me around. This isn't negotiable." The businessman was back, his tone firm. "My position makes anyone connected to me a potential target. That now includes you and, more importantly, my child." "Our child," Serena corrected again, more forcefully this time. and I didn't sign up to be followed by men in dark suits. The security team is professional and unobtrusive. You'll hardly notice them. That's not the point. Serena fought to keep her voice, even despite her rising irritation. The point is, you're making decisions about my life without consulting me first. Damien's jaw tightened. These aren't arbitrary decisions. They're necessary precautions. Something in his expressiona genuine concern beneath the authoritative exterior made Serena pause. This wasn't just about control. He was actually worried. How about a compromise? She suggested. Security when I'm at public events or meetings related to the cafe opening, but not for my day-to-day activities. He frowned. That leaves significant vulnerability. It's that or nothing, Serena said firmly. I won't live in a bubble for the next 8 months. Their standoff was interrupted by the waiter's return. This time, Damien allowed him to present the menus and recite the evening specials. As they ordered, Serena noticed Damien subtly directing the waiter away from certain dishes he clearly deemed inappropriate for her condition. I can order for myself, she said once the waiter had gone. Of course. Of course. Damien had the grace to look slightly abashed. Old habits controlling everything around you, protecting my interests. He took a sip of his drink. Though I concede I may be approaching this situation too clinically, the admission surprised her. You think? A hint of a smile touched his lips. Our arrangement is unusual. I'm not accustomed to sharing decision-making when it comes to important projects. I'm not a project, Serena said quietly, and neither is this baby. Something flickered in his eyes, discomfort, perhaps, or realization. No, you're not. He set his glass down carefully. I apologize if my actions have seemed overbearing. My intention was to provide support, not to control. The apology, however qualified, was unexpected. Serena studied him across the table, remembering the flashes of vulnerability she'd glimpsed during their night together. Beneath the billionaire exterior was a man used to maintaining control at all costs. A man who was now facing perhaps the one situation in life that couldn't be managed with money and power alone. How about this? She offered. You can make suggestions about security, health measures, whatever else concerns you, but they remain suggestions until we discuss them together. Damien considered this, his expression thoughtful. That's reasonable. He reached into his jacket and produced a small box. Which brings me to this. Serena eyed the box warily. What is it? Open it. Inside was a sleek smartphone. I have a phone, she said, confused. This one has enhanced security features and a direct line to my security team, if needed. He held up a hand as she started to protest. A suggestion only. For your consideration. Serena couldn't help the small smile that formed. You're learning. I adapt quickly to new parameters. There was that hint of a smile again, transforming his usually stern features. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Damien surprised her by asking detailed questions about the cafe rebuild, not just cursory interest, but specific inquiries about her vision, her menu plans, her staffing strategy. You seem genuinely interested in the cafe, she observed. I'm interested in anything that matters to the mother of my child. He paused, then added more quietly, and I've been impressed by your business acumen. Few people would have developed such a comprehensive rebuilding strategy so quickly. The compliment, delivered without flattery or agenda, caught her off guard. Thank you. As dinner concluded, Serena realized they'd somehow shifted from adversaries negotiating terms to something almost like partners discussing shared concerns. It was disconcerting how easily conversation flowed once they moved past their power struggle. Outside the restaurant, his driver waited with the car. May I offer you a ride home? Damien asked. I drove myself. Serena reminded him. He nodded, seemingly reluctant to end the evening. I'd like to see the cafe site, perhaps tomorrow, if you're agreeable. Another unexpected request. Why? Professional curiosity. He hesitated. And personal interest. Serena considered refusing, but found herself nodding instead. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. I'll text you the address. I know the address. At her raised eyebrow, he added, Due diligence, remember? As she turned to leave, he caught her hand the first time he'd touched her since their night together. The contact sent an unwelcome spark through her. Serena, his voice had softened. Thank you for this. His eyes dropped briefly to her stomach. For a moment, they stood connected, the busy restaurant entrance fading around them. Then Serena gently withdrew her hand. Good night, Damien. Walking to her car, she felt his eyes following her. This wasn't what she'd signed up for, this strange, evolving relationship that kept shifting beneath her feet. The contract had been clear. Conception, pregnancy, delivery, payment clinical, straightforward, emotionally detached. Nothing had prepared her for a Damien Knight who sent prenatal vitamins, asked about her business, and looked at her with something that went beyond their contractual obligation. As she drove home, one hand unconsciously drifted to her stomach. "Well, little one," she murmured, "things just got a lot more complicated." Chapter 5. Power Struggles. 6 weeks later, Brooks Flow Cafe was taking shape again. The hurricane debris had been cleared, new walls stood where destruction had been, and the custom-designed counter was being installed. Standing in what would soon be her kitchen, Serena couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and gratitude. The tile delivery is scheduled for Thursday, Antonio, her contractor, said as he reviewed the timeline, and the espresso machine should arrive next Monday. "Perfect," Serena replied, one hand unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. At 9 weeks pregnant, she didn't look any different, but she felt different, more tired, occasionally queasy, and increasingly aware of the life growing inside her. Antonio followed her gaze to the large front windows, where a black sedan had been parked for the past hour. "Your investor checking up on progress again?" Serena sighed. "Something like that." Despite their agreement about security only at public events, she'd noticed the discreet but unmistakable presence of Damien's Pioplanat, following her exactly, but happening to be wherever she went. So far, she'd chosen not to confront him about it. Her phone vibrated with a calendar notification: prenatal appointment tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Below it was a text message from Damien: "We'll join you for the ultrasound. Car will pick you up at 9:30. Not a question, a statement. Serena typed back: "I can drive myself. See you there if you'd like to attend." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, "As you wish. I'll meet you at Dr. Lee's office." A small victory in their ongoing power struggle. Since confirming her pregnancy, Damien had inserted himself into her life in ways the contract never specified, calling daily for updates, arranging deliveries of pregnancy-appropriate foods, insisting on reviewing the cafe reconstruction plans for safety considerations. The cafe itself was progressing faster than expected, largely because Damien had connections with suppliers and contractors that moved Serena to the front of every waiting list. She appreciated the help, but resented the implication that she couldn't manage on her own. "Miss Brooks?" Antonio's voice pulled her back to the present. "The lighting fixture chrome or brass finishes?" "Brass," she decided. "Warmer aesthetic." After finalizing the remaining details, Serena left the construction site, deliberately walking past the black sedan. The driver studiously avoided eye contact, confirming her suspicions. Shaking her head, she got into her own car and headed to Lila's apartment for their weekly dinner. "He still having you followed?" Lila asked later, as they sat on her balcony, the Miami sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Not officially following, just conveniently positioned wherever I go." Serena stabbed at her salad. "It's infuriating, but also kind of sweet," Lila suggested with a raised eyebrow. "He's clearly concerned about you." "He's concerned about his investment," Serena corrected, though she wasn't entirely convinced of her own words. Damien's behavior went beyond prudent monitoring of a business arrangement. "Speaking of which, how was your dinner with him last week?" Lila leaned forward eagerly, like a business meeting with undertones of something else. Serena couldn't quite define the strange energy that existed between them now. He spent 20 minutes discussing the nutritional benefits of different prenatal supplements, then asked about my grandmother's recipes for the cafe. "Sounds riveting," Lila laughed. "The strangest part is that he seems genuinely interested, not just making conversation." Serena set down her fork. "Yesterday, he sent over a rare Cuban cookbook from the 1950s that he happened to find at an auction." "Who does that?" "A man who's developing feelings for the mother of his child." Serena shook her head firmly. "That's not part of our arrangement. He wants an heir, not a relationship." "Sometimes what we want and what we get are different things," Lila said wisely. The next morning at Dr. Lee's office, Serena arrived to find Damien already waiting in a private room, reviewing emails on his phone. He stood immediately when she entered. "You're looking well," he said, his eyes scanning her as if checking for visible changes. "I feel fine," she replied. "Morning sickness hasn't been too bad." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Dr. Lee entered with a warm smile. "Good morning. We're doing an ultrasound today to check development and get a more precise due date." As Serena lay back on the examination table, she was acutely aware of Damien standing nearby. his usual commanding presence somehow subdued in this medical setting. When Dr. Lee applied the cold gel to her stomach, she flinched slightly. "Sorry about that," the doctor said. "Let's see what we've got here." The room filled with a rapid whooshing sound, the baby's heartbeat. Serena's own heart seemed to stop for a moment, as the reality of the life inside her became undeniably concrete. "There's your baby, doctor," Lee said, pointing to a small shape on the screen, measuring right on track for 9 weeks. Strong heartbeat. "It's so tiny," Serena whispered. She glanced at Damien and was startled by his expression, a mixture of awe and vulnerability she'd never seen on his face before. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his usual mask of control completely gone. "That's our child," he said softly, as if to himself. Something shifted in the room, the emotional weight of the moment transcending their contractual relationship. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. It was a life they had created together, however clinical the circumstances. The moment broke when Dr. Lee finished the examination and handed Serena tissues to wipe away the gel. "Everything looks perfect. I'll print some images for you both." As Serena sat up and adjusted her clothing, Damien seemed to collect himself, the businessman returning as he asked Dr. Lee detailed questions about development milestones and optimal nutrition. In the hallway afterward, he held the envelope containing the ultrasound images, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Would you like these? I can have copies made. We can share them," Serena said, surprised by her own generosity. "You keep those. I have the real thing with me all the time anyway." She gestured to her stomach with a small smile. Damien nodded, carefully tucking the envelope into his suit jacket. "I have a meeting with the hospital board at noon, but I'd like to see the cafe progress afterward. Would 4 o'clock work for you?" Again, not quite a question, not quite a command. Serena considered refusing on principle, but found herself saying, "4 is fine. I'll meet you there." That afternoon, Damien arrived precisely on time, having exchanged his formal suit for more casual dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt. Even in relaxed clothing, he exuded authority as he examined the reconstruction. "The support beams should be hurricane-reinforced," he said, inspecting the framework, "and you'll want impact-resistant glass for these front windows." Serena crossed her arms. "The contractor already recommended those upgrades. We're implementing them." "Good." Damien nodded approvingly. "What about a backup generator?" "Power outages are common during storm season, already in the plans." She couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Contrary to what you might think, I can manage a business renovation without supervision." He turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. "I never suggested otherwise. Your actions suggest otherwise. The daily check-ins, the unannounced visits, the security detail I explicitly said I didn't want." The frustration she'd been containing for weeks finally boiled over. "This isn't what we agreed to, Damien." "Circumstances change," he said simply. "The contract covered the basic arrangement. It couldn't anticipate every detail. It certainly didn't anticipate you micromanaging my life." Her voice rose enough that Antonio glanced over curiously from across the room. Damien took her elbow gently, guiding her toward the back office area for privacy. The touch sent an unwelcome spark through her arm. "I am not micromanaging," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I'm taking an interest in the well-being of my child and, by extension, you. An interest is asking how I'm feeling. What you're doing is surveillance and interference." His jaw tightened. "You agreed to security at public events. The cafe reconstruction qualifies. A car parked outside my apartment at night doesn't." Serena countered. "Yes, I noticed. Every night this week." For a moment, Damien looked almost abashed, then his expression hardened again. "My child deserves protection. So does its mother. I am not just a vessel for your heir." The words came out louder than she intended, echoing in the unfinished space. "I'm a person with my own life, my own business, my own decisions to make. You can't control everything, Damien, no matter how much money you have." They stood facing each other, the tension between them electric. His gray eyes had darkened with anger, but there was something else there, to a heat that had nothing to do with their argument. "I don't aim to control you," he said finally, his voice dropping. "I aim to protect what matters to me." "And what exactly matters to you? Just the baby, or something else?" Serena challenged, stepping closer. The air between them seemed to thin. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her, and worse. She wanted him to. The memory of their night together flashed vividly in her mind. Instead, Damien stepped back, his expression closing off. "The agreement matters. Our child matters. The rest is irrelevant." "Is it?" Serena pressed. Then why are you here, Damien? Why the cookbook? Why daily calls that have nothing to do with the pregnancy? I don't have to explain myself to you. His voice was cold now. The vulnerable man from the doctor's office completely gone. Actually, you do, when your actions affect my life. Serena refused to be intimidated. We have a contract, not a relationship. You made that distinction very clear from the beginning. Something flickered in his eyeshirt, perhaps, though she couldn't imagine why. If my interest in your well-being is so offensive, I'll scale back. You'll receive updates through Dr. Lee and Valeria going forward. The formal tone felt like a slap after weeks of almost friendly interactions. Fine, that's what we agreed to anyway. Fine. He turned to leave, then paused. The security stays, non négociable. Before she could argue further, he was gone. His long strides carrying him quickly out of the cafe and into the waiting car. Serena stood in the middle of her half-finished cafe, simultaneously relieved and bereft. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Professional distance, adherence to the original agreement. No complications. Yet, as she watched his car pull away, she couldn't ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. Somewhere along the way, their clinical arrangement had developed undertones of something else, something neither of them had bargained for. That evening, her phone remained silent, no texts asking about her dinner choices. No calls checking on her symptoms, no updates about prenatal vitamins or cafe supplies. Just as she'd insisted, just as they'd agreed, Serena placed her hand on her stomach, where their child grew, oblivious to the complicated emotions swirling between its parents. Your father is the most infuriating man I've ever met, she told the baby. Controlling, demanding, impossible. She paused, remembering the look on Damien's face when he saw the ultrasound, that moment of pure, unguarded wonder. But there might be more to him than that, she admitted softly, and that's what scares me. Chapter 6.